Hi everyone, it's Yvette Le Blowitz from SPAITGIRL.com and welcome to the Spirit Girl Talk Show podcast. I'm super excited to be here with you today and with our very special guest. Dr. Rebecca Ray is a clinical psychologist, author and speaker. She helps women entrepreneurs and creators live a life that's fulfilling. Rebecca has been a clinical psychologist for the best part of 2 decades and is the author of 4 books, including The Art of Self-Kindness and The Universe Listens to Brave. We're here today to talk to Dr. Rebecca Ray about her brand new book, which is launched this year, titled Setting Boundaries, Care for Yourself and Stop Being Controlled by Others. Dr. Rebecca Ray, welcome back to the Spirit Girl podcast show. How are you today?
I'm well, thanks, Yvette. How are you?
Really well. Thank all of our global audience for tuning in today. And also, congratulations on the launch of your brand new book. How does it feel to have your book out now?
This one's a little different for me because this is the first time I have a book that's formally self-development. So it's not just a gift book like Be Happy, The Universe Listens to Brave, and The Art of Self-Kindness were little hardback pretty books. The Setting Boundaries is it's actually bigger than what I expected it to be. It's a significant in-depth look at how we set boundaries. And so I have been so excited by the reception to this book. I've had a lot of interest from the media, which has been so exciting. And I have never received so many DMs and emails and messages about people being impacted by my work as I have since Setting Boundaries was launched. So for someone that was scared that I wouldn't be able to write a book that was good enough on setting boundaries, it's just been the most incredible ride to be able to sit here and go, wow, this book is doing the job I really hoped it would do.
Well, I'm so excited about your book. It is, I believe, one of your best. All of your books are incredible, but when it comes into developing ourselves on a really personal level, it just has so much more depth.
Yeah.
And your other books are gorgeous. For those of you, have a look at Dr. Rebecca Ray's books. But this book in particular, which we're talking about, is brand new. It's out at every retailer. I loved seeing it at Big W, at Kmart, Targets. It's on booktopia.com. It's Amazon. It's everywhere. And I have seen the excitement with so many people taking photos of it, videos, just the outpouring of gratitude and thank you. And I'm getting goosebumps while I say this. I really am. But it's just been so incredible that you've brought out a book that's really touched people's heart, really been of benefit and been really needed and practical for where we're at in life right now. So congratulations again. It's really, really inspiring. It's practical book. It's accessible. Anyone of any age could pick it up and read it. It's an easy read. So thank you. But before we dive into your book, are you happy to tell our listeners a little bit about yourself?
So you covered it when you said that I was a clinical psychologist. I've been a clinical psychologist for nearly 2 decades. I spent the first, part of my career working in a private hospital on a mental health ward. And then I moved into working for the Department of Veteran Affairs. And I spent a lot of time working with military and both retired and current serving personnel. And then I moved into private practice, and I was in private practice for oh my goodness, maybe a decade or longer. And then I accidentally, because I didn't listen to my intuition, hit a fairly significant wall of burnout much earlier in my career than what I had expected. And the burnout started making decisions for me, I guess, it's interesting that we're talking about boundaries because I violated so many of my internal boundaries without realizing it until the burnout was actually the one that made the decision for me. And I closed my practice with no idea what I was going to do with my life. And I simply just had to recover. And in doing so, I really had to stop and think, what do I want to do? And my passion is and always has been psychology. And I was thinking, there's only so many people you can reach in a day when you're working one-on-one. And So I just wondered whether or not there was a way that my work or my message, the concepts that I constantly worked through with people, could be translated in such a way that they could reach a lot more people. And for someone that just never had a Facebook profile or anything, like I wasn't even on social media, I thought, I wonder if I could use the internet in some way. And so that kind of started out of the pit of burnout. Like I literally did not know what to do with my life. And I happened to develop a social media profile on Instagram that grew quite big. And then, would you believe, I didn't believe it. I thought it was spam, but I was approached by a publisher who said, "Do you want to write a book?" And I had always wanted to be a writer ever since I was a little girl, but I did the right thing and got a real job and became a psychologist. And so when I got this DM, I was like, this is bullshit. Like, surely this is spam. And I told my wife and I said, I think I'm being spammed. Like, someone's just asked me if I want to write a book. And so I didn't respond. I went and looked this person up. And she was legitimate. Like she had a profile on LinkedIn. She like worked for a publishing house in New York. And I was like, is this for real? Like, you don't just get approached by a publisher. Anyway, I said, my answer was yes, I want to write a book. And Be Happy was born. I got myself an agent in Australia and developed my relationship with Pan Macmillan. And that's how The Universe Listens to Brave, and then The Art of Self-Kindness and Now Setting Boundaries is born. And I've since also published through Audible as well, Audible original podcast called Breakthrough on self-sabotage. And so I guess to kind of summarize what I do now, I try to take my particular way of translating psychological concepts into layperson language that everyone can understand, and convey it in a compassionate way online and through writing. So, I mean, technically my job now, I guess, is as an author, which is so weird to say, but I guess that's I spend the majority of my time now writing or planning the next book or publicizing the book that's just come out or something. Most of my time involves something to do with a book, but the very heart of my work is not just, oh, let's write a book. It's more, how can I take what I know in terms of my wisdom from working so long as a psychologist, but also just living as a human? How can I combine those two things to be able to create the most help possible for readers?
Well, congratulations on your journey.
Thank you.
I'm so proud of you. We love you in Australia, and people love you globally as well. And it's incredible that you have turned your burnout into another career as an author and speaking, and you can now help other people to prevent burnout. As you know, I've experienced burnout, and it
Yep,
completely changes how you look after yourself and how you care for yourself. But it's
absolutely.
incredible that you are an author, that you are taking your wisdom, you're making it accessible and easy for anyone to comprehend and understand. And it's such a gift. So
Thank
it's
you.
incredible. Now, Dr. Rebecca Ray, we can call you Beck Ray. When it comes to your brand new book, what inspired you to write this book, and what is the meaning behind the title?
I wasn't inspired to write a book on boundaries. I was chatting with my publisher and we were talking about the next book and the topic of the next book. And I was talking to her and I was kind of like, oh, I think I want to write something on worthiness. And she goes, nah. She didn't say nah. She's far more eloquent than that. But she said, actually, I see so many people at the moment struggling with boundaries. And I was like, boundaries, whoa, like calm down. I can't write a book on boundaries. I never treated couples. Boundaries is to do with relationships. And she goes, but what about all the people out there that are struggling to say no? What about all the people out there that are struggling with work-life balance and just coping with the demands of the pandemic? And I said, oh, I can do all of that. And she goes, well, I'm not necessarily talking about a couples relationships book. I'm talking about bringing boundaries to the masses. So I thought she had a really good point, but I was reluctant. Like I was like, oh, do I have to? And then only because it's just such an important topic, I didn't necessarily trust that I could do the topic justice. And so I agreed reluctantly because basically like it was just write a book on boundaries or don't write a book. And I was like, well, if that's what you really want, then okay, I'll write you a book on boundaries. And I procrastinated. Oh my God, I procrastinated for so long because I was so scared of this book, and I put it off and I put it off. And then I finally like, don't do what I do. Like, honestly, don't push up against a deadline. Like I'll never do that again, but I push up against the deadline so tightly. Don't recommend. But what ended up happening was I spent a lot of time with myself internally, and I listened a lot to my community online. I asked them so many questions, and they were amazing at responding. So much of my research came from Instagram posts. Before I started writing, I would just throw up a post and say, tell me the biggest boundary struggles you have at work, and I would get like 100 comments or more on each of those posts. And that really formed the crux of the book for me. And so I guess despite the fact that my publisher flagged the topic, my inspiration deeply actually came from my community, and also my fear came from my community as well, because I wanted to serve them so well. I just wanted to do such a good job at this book for them, and that was what my fear was about. I was very much stuck in this kind of imposter syndrome of, oh yeah, I'm a psychologist, but that doesn't mean I can write a good book on boundaries. And every book I'd read on boundaries was so bloody dry that it made me want to slap myself in the face, right? So I was like, I don't want to write a book that makes people go to sleep, when they're thinking about boundaries. And so apparently, according to my community, I succeeded. And there's a book that they can finally kind of get their hands on that allows them to not only dive into boundaries and what they're about, but also understand the complexity and the depth of boundaries for themselves. Because it's not just a like simple kind of tagline topic. There's so many complexities to it, because we have the complexities within ourselves, so our relationship with ourselves and how we set boundaries internally. And then we also have what is the most complex part of all our lives, which is how we interact with others.
Well, I'm so glad that you took on the challenge to write the book, that the publisher saw this book in you and your potential. But it's incredible how you used your own community to ask them questions and to really listen and to learn and to take that on and to bring that into your book. Because when we listen to people, I'm a true believer of this, or when we ask questions to all people, all inclusive, and we listen, we can learn so much. And it's incredible that your community has now been part of the inspiration for this book.
Yeah.
And that they're loving it. And it really is going viral, your book. I've spoken to so many people. I'm getting goosebumps again, but I've spoken to so many people who love your book, the color, everything it stands for, everything it's about. But when it comes to identifying our boundaries, how do we do that?
My answer around this is always perhaps not what you think, because I honestly believe that rather than kind of giving you a 1, 2, 3 kind of formula for identifying boundaries, instead, I prefer people to work backwards, because the best information that we have that there is a boundary there is that we cross it or someone else has crossed it and it causes us discomfort. Now, as human beings, we actually pay attention to discomfort more than we pay attention to anything else. So if we feel uncomfortable, that's the first thing that grabs our brain's attention. So I would get listeners to think about, where are you feeling resentful? Where are you feeling frustrated, irritated, angry? Where are you feeling bitter or cynical? Because my bet is what's happening is there is a boundary of yours that exists that is being crossed by someone else, or you are crossing it for yourself. We have boundaries within ourselves, for example, what we eat, how often we exercise, how much screen time we have, all those types of things where we regulate our own behavior. And I don't know about you, but I'm a master of crossing those boundaries. And much to my own disgust, so you have your relationship with yourself and your ability to be able to, what we might call, be self-disciplined. Self-discipline actually applies to the boundaries that we hold within. Then we have boundaries between us and the outside world and everyone in it. So the best way to identify your boundaries is to look for where you're feeling uncomfortable. If you're feeling taken advantage of, someone is crossing your boundaries, and you may not have ever realized that the boundary was there. Or else you may know the boundary is there, and you may be falling into the trap of just wishing that other people were mind readers and that they would respect your boundaries. But the thing is that people who are benefiting from us having loose boundaries or absent boundaries are very unlikely to set boundaries for us. So instead, they'll just continue profiting from having access to our resources until we close the door.
And one of the things I think I personally struggle with, and maybe our listeners may be able to resonate with, is I have these grand expectations that I can do everything.
Mm-hmm.
So I might lock myself into too many things. And then, as an example, it might be I'm visiting my mum 3 times a week minimum at the aged care home. But then you've got a busy week at work and everything else. And then you might come to Saturday and feel so exhausted, like completely spent, where you don't even want to get off the couch or in the car because you're just exhausted. But then you're like, oh, but I got to do it.
Mm.
And then you're depleting your energy or your reserve. When we've said yes to someone, but we feel totally spent, totally exhausted, like we just woke up and we need a morning to ourselves to recharge our batteries, what is the best way to communicate? Because what I feel is, as a people pleaser, I want to please everyone. I want to be there for everyone, but sometimes we need to be there for ourselves. Is it okay just to say, I'm so sorry, I had great intentions on visiting you today, but I have to reschedule for another day because I'm just feeling exhausted from the week at work?
Absolutely, that's okay. But I also wouldn't even bother apologizing. I think we really need to normalize the capacity to be able to say, I'm no longer able to do this, but I'd love to chat to you or visit you at this time without the apology attached to it. I mean, you can apologize, but I do think as women that we are very much socialized to apologizing just for existing, and just for not being what everyone else wants us to be. I do think it's really important to understand from a people pleasing perspective that if you give access to your giving tanks when they're depleted, then you'll end up burnt out. That's how we end up burnt out. And when you're in a significant state of burnout, there's no coming back from that. You can't just have a nap on a Saturday afternoon and expect that your giving tanks will be completely replenished by Monday morning. Significant emotional burnout doesn't work like that. It can take months, if not years, of recovery. And so I don't want to scare the people pleasers out there, but I do want to say, please take the resources available in your giving tanks very, very seriously, because no one else is going to fill up those tanks for you. You need to make the decision around how to fill those giving tanks up and the timing of that for yourself. Now, in terms of how we set boundaries with other people, when we desperately wish we could do the thing that they're asking. Like, I'll give you an example. My best friend is a psychologist as well. And I messaged her the other day and I said, I'm about to write a book on this particular topic. I can't disclose the topic, but this particular topic is going to be my next book. Can you give me some ideas of what shows up for you around this particular topic? Her response was, hi, little one. That's our nickname for each other. She said, my resources for talking about work outside of work at the moment are so incredibly limited because I've got all this stuff going on with my mum. Her mum's not very well at the moment. And so I'm setting some strong personal boundaries around not having work conversations outside of work. My thoughts around it wouldn't be very useful because I just don't have the cognitive space available. I know that you'd write a brilliant book on on this particular topic, and I can't wait to talk about it with you once it's published or once I'm in a better space. So that was her response. There was no apology. It was just, hey, I'm not in this place to be able to provide this for you at the moment. Now, because we have such a strong relationship, and also because we're both psychologists, my response to that is actually, what a gift. What a gift that she can show me how to respect her and her space and her resources right now. And this is what I really want listeners to take away with them, is that boundaries in our interactions and relationships with other people are the biggest gifts we can give each other. Because it means that there's no building resentment, because I know exactly where I stand now. I know where she's at. I can also flag for myself, oh, she needs a bit more support right now, and not just random Instagram messages around new book topics. And it allows me to be able to make sure that I'm not crossing her resource boundaries until I next check in with where she's at. So I just really think, especially for people pleasers that often decide that boundaries are mean or selfish, that if you can wrap your head around the fact that boundaries are actually a relational gift, you'll change your entire life and way of interacting with each other.
I love that example, and I'm sorry to hear of her mum not being well. Most of the psychologists I'm speaking to are really feeling the effects of the global pandemic. And a lot of people I'm speaking to in lockdown are experiencing burnout. I too, with my mum falling ill, having the seizure and going into a coma, then sadly being diagnosed terminally ill, I've had to learn how to say no and not be blunt, but just explain the situation. Like, I don't have any capacity to take on any extra speaking engagements or writing or podcast interviews or whatever it might be. And my old self would have been, oh, yes, I can do that. I can do that. But then when I checked in with myself, when you talk about boundaries, and I felt like, oh, I don't have the capacity, I felt it is better to just tell people where I'm at and what's happening in my life. It's not that I don't want to be part of all of these incredible things. As you know, we'd love to be, but it's quite draining when you have a parent who's quite ill on top of work and things. When it comes to setting your own boundaries, would you say now you are getting better at it after writing a whole book on setting boundaries?
Thanks to having parents who are very good at their own boundaries. So my parents are the type of parents who won't do anything that they don't want to do, even if that looks offensive to other people. So if my dad doesn't want to go and visit, so even me, he just won't. And what that has done is it's socialized me to the fact that I always know where I stand with them. And I know that if they do go somewhere, it's because they genuinely want to be there, not because they're then going to, kind of whinge about it afterwards. And so I guess having that modeled to me as I was growing up, I have grown up as an adult that now, especially in my 40s, I love being 42 now, but I love being in my 40s because the older I get, the more comfortable I get in my skin, the more aware I am that we only have so much time in this life. And so I'm very precious in how I distribute my resources. It's not writing the book that made me good at boundaries. I was good at boundaries beforehand. It's that I am very devoted to my 80-year-old self. And so I'm constantly in conversation with my imaginary 80-year-old self and asking her, is this where we want to spend our time today? If I go and do this, are you going to say that was a good use of our time in this one wild and precious life? Thank you very much, Mary Oliver. This kind of constant internal barometer of boundaries is what I use to inform my yes and inform my no. And I say no a lot. I say no to podcast interviews. I say no to speaking opportunities. I say no to every man and his dog that's running some online summit that wants me to appear for free as a guest speaker. No, there are so many no's, but my yeses are these precious kind of opportunities for my resources to be used in line with who I want to be and who I want to spend my time with. And I think that flavor is what informed my book, to be able to talk from a place of you need to be your own inner leader. You need to be able to make decisions around how you want to live your life and not give those choices away to someone who's not you. That's what informed my book, because I do that on a daily basis. I'm just fantastic at saying no.
You are fantastic, and I feel so grateful that you are here today with myself and the whole Spirit Girl podcast community and audience globally, because we have your precious time. But you were very good at saying no, and I'll tell you why. When I wanted to interview you about the self-kindness book, which I love, and we've done a podcast show, everyone check that one out too. You were very good at saying no. I think I had to wait 3 or 4 months until a little window of opportunity did come up, because I probably bugged your PA more times than ever and kept annoying her. However, we got there in the end. I love how you are good at saying no. And so when we say no, we shouldn't feel guilty, should we? Because I know sometimes I don't when it's work related. But when it's family related, I can sometimes feel bad, as in guilty. But then I have to come back to, hang on a minute, if I do that, I'll burn out. I don't have the energy to go. I wouldn't be much fun. I'd be a drag. I need a day off.
You can still feel bad. Like, it's okay to have feelings. It's okay to not feel great that someone will be disappointed if you say no. I mean, that's just a sign that you're not a psychopath. It's a sign that you have empathy for others, right? But it's also about not living in that guilt and understanding that. And this is why I say no so often, because I'm committed to showing up 100%. If I say no to you, it's because I know that if we meet at that particular time, I'm going to be either pissed off, resentful, or it's going to take me away from something else that's more important right now for my resources. If I say yes to you, then what I'm committing to is at the time that we've agreed to meet or have an exchange of energy or resources, I'm here 100%. And that's what I want listeners to understand. If you're saying no, even to a loved one, it's because you know that you can't be there for them 100%. So rather than just half-assing it and showing up and then feeling guilty because you weren't all of yourself, you're giving them the gift of saying, this is when you can have me as all myself.
And some people struggle with setting in self-care time. So I speak to a lot of mums or a lot of women, and they struggle to carve out some self-care time. They often complain that their husband has more time than ever to do golf or go fishing or be with the boys or whatever it might be. And they feel that everything is dumped on them, the housework, running the kids around, and they have no time. Then they become resentful towards their partner. In that situation, do they need to set their boundary and communicate what it is or what they need?
Yeah, that's right. So what they need to do is to get really clear on what's happening in the relationship. And it's usually this kind of mismatched distribution of housework. And I'm a big believer that balance doesn't exist. I actually really despise the word balance when it applies to women in Western culture. It just doesn't exist as far as I'm concerned. So instead, in relationships, I really encourage people to go for rhythm. And that means that there are times where the rhythm is quicker and the demands in your life are more. So we have a toddler. He's now 3.5, super needy. I mean, it's not like having a baby, but a baby doesn't move. You can kind of put them down, they stay in the same place. So there's a lot going on in our lives, and we only have one child, let alone multiple children. It's just a busy time in life. So you expect that the rhythm's going to be a bit more. Now, what happens with boundaries is if we don't communicate clearly that the other person is crossing our boundaries by not contributing around the house, then we tend to build up that resentment or that anger. And that then simmers and can often come out as passive aggression or aggression. Passive aggression as in, no, I'm fine, like you're not fine at all. But it just seems easier than actually saying what's really wrong. One of the things that we need to do in relationships is get used to communicating our needs, not from a place of exploding because you've simmered in resentment for so long, but instead to just identify this is not working for me. If you think of relationships as long-term, which most of us do, some people don't, but if you're in a long-term relationship, the biggest gift you can give your partner is communication about where you're at. This is how we can evolve together as a couple rather than end up growing apart.
I love that. And with a little toddler, how do you actually fit in any self-care? How do you build that into your busy life when you've got your book launch? You're doing so much at the moment. What does
Yeah.
taking care of you look like at the moment?
That's a great question because we've also just adopted 2 Irish setters from the RSPCA. So we have 3 dogs now, including my Weimaraner, who's 12, and these 2 Irish setters were severely neglected. One is 7 and one is 9, and they have ongoing health issues. So we have 3 dogs and a 3.5-year-old, and what happens around self-care is we just come together as a team. So now that we're heading into spring and summer, Nissa and I swim together. We go down to the local pool when Bennett's at kindy and we spend an hour swimming. And it's not only this kind of mindful exercise, because we don't talk to each other while we're swimming, but it's this celebration of couple time, kind of individual time and couple time and self-care time, to just know that we can tick that box to go, we've done something for ourselves. It's not long. It's just an hour, an hour and a half by the time we drive there and get home. I guess that might be long for some people, and we do take up our work time to do that. So sometimes we take Bennett with us, in which case we take turns swimming while we look after him. He loves that. We did that both days on the weekend. But we will also take time out of our work day to look after ourselves, because one of the things is that I've found, actually, it's the same for Nissa as well. When you love what you do, it can be really tempting to just go, no, I've got a long to-do list. I'm just going to jump into my office and I'll get to the self-care later. Bullshit. You're never actually going to get to it unless you actually schedule it in. So, and the other thing I do personal training, and that's appointment twice a week in my diary. And I'm not great at breaking appointments. So I hate going. You just ask my personal trainer. I whinge the entire time. I'm the biggest complainer. She just laughs at me for the whole half an hour. But because it's a diarized appointment every week, I turn up, I do the thing.
You
Just
look
what I do.
amazing. You look amazing. For everyone, go to the SPAITGIRL YouTube channel, because Dr. Rebecca Ray is literally, I said this off air, is literally glowing. Her hair looks incredible. Her skin is amazing. And behind her, you
It's
have this
because I've got new
beautiful
puppies. I feel like I've just had a baby.
You've got this beautiful rainbow behind you painting. But you look amazing. And I love how you're doing the couples, but the exercise together. And obviously, you're in the water, so you've switched off from social media, which is incredible for you, with such a big following and big community and people always wanting to talk to you with DMs. But I also love how you're flexible, and if you have to bring Bennett, you can. And it's so interesting when it comes to setting these self-care boundaries. Before we hit record, I had to do my 30-minute walk, because if I don't, I could have literally just stayed in this little office and not done it. And I thought, nah, it's got to just routine. I only commit to 3 times a week, minimum 30-minute walk.
Yeah.
And if I can do that, I'm really happy.
To not be perfectionistic about it.
I used to try and do an hour workout and 5 times a week. Then I used to beat myself up. I can't do this. I can't do that. And now that I'm doing these smaller workouts, I actually feel less stressed. I feel better, and it's more manageable. I was
Absolutely.
overwhelming myself. Now,
Yeah.
Beck, I could talk to you forever about setting boundaries. Your book has got so much content in there, so much knowledge, so many tips. So I'd really recommend everyone go to booktopia.com.au or amazon.com. Really, any bookstore. You can grab it at Big W if you're in Australia, but any bookstore, it's out everywhere.
It's out everywhere in Australia and New Zealand. So you can get it at all bookstores or good bookstores in Australia and New Zealand. Pro tip, it's cheapest at Big W and Target. It will be out very shortly in the UK in print, and it will be out in the US in print in May 2022. So sorry about the wait there. But everywhere in the world, you can get it in Kindle and audio format as well. So I did read the whole book for 8.5 hours, and the audio is available everywhere. So if you're kind of sitting in the States and you're thinking, oh, I don't want to wait for the print, I totally understand. Jump on Kindle or jump on Audible and you'll be able to download it there.
Well, big plug to Audible, because the Spirit Girl podcast show is on Audible, and I love Audible because nothing better than going for a walk and listening to Dr. Rebecca Ray's Setting Boundaries, Care for Yourself and Stop Being Controlled by Others. Now, Dr. Rebecca Ray, what's your hope for your book reader or your audio book listener?
That they will walk away from the book feeling empowered by boundaries rather than scared of them. I really want people to understand that boundaries are a gift to yourself and to other people. They're not selfish or mean. They are actually the nicest thing you can do in your relationships.
Love it. And how can we stay in touch with you after this podcast show?
Everyone can find me at rebeccaray.com.au or on all the socials, and primarily on Instagram, though, as at Dr. Rebecca Ray.
Well, thank you, Dr. Rebecca Ray. You are an absolute treasure to our country, to our people, just such an inspiration. You really are. Your work is incredible, and congratulations again on your brand new book, Setting Boundaries.
Thanks so much, Yvette. Thank you for having me.
Well, we'll say goodbye to Rebecca Ray. Be sure to subscribe, to leave a 5-star rating and review, and to tell someone you love to. And together, let's feel good from within.